Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first edition of In the Box. And this is an original knowledge series here at Boxplay, where we'll be sharing different topics. And the goal is to be able to help founders on their journey and help the general ecosystem and anyone who needs help on the different topics that we'll be discussing. Now, today, our main topic for discussion is how to create a winning pitch. Now, as almost everybody probably knows, one of the most essential documents that you need to have is a pitch deck. Unfortunately, it is more than just putting slides together. And so today we have gathered seasoned professionals from different industries to share with us, mostly for entrepreneurs, how to create a pitch deck that is able to win you advocates and investors so that you're able to grow your business as you should. And the interesting thing about my guests today is that they are all from different angles of the ecosystem. So we have someone who works from the accelerator and venture side. We have someone who works from the investment side. We have someone who works from an impact side. And then we also have a founder who is amazing at pitching. So I will let my guests go ahead and introduce themselves. Ladies first, so Leah, I'll be happy to have you go first, then Ifeoma after you if she's ready to share.
Thank you, Marilyn. My name is Leah Nduati. I really appreciate Boxplay Ventures creating this space where we speak to founders. So I work with Sand Technologies on the entrepreneurship side, which is called ALX Ventures. And I lead the accelerator where we support tech startups across the continent to grow and scale and access investment. I'm also a founder. I run a wellness startup called Yoga Experiences Africa. It's still in the early stages, but yeah, excited to share that as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Ifeoma.
Hello.
My name is Ifeoma. I'm the co-founder and COO at Sendstack. Sendstack is a logistics solution for businesses, and we provide end-to-end solutions for businesses and also provide them with technical tools to manage their processes better so that they can serve more customers at scale, and this is ranging from services like last mile deliveries, international, like global deliveries. And I'm so happy to be a part of this. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here today. Ernest?
Thanks, Marilyn. It's a pleasure again to be here, hosted by Boxplay. So I'm Ernest Osei. I'm Ghanaian. I lead Incluziv Studios. So Incluziv Studios is it's a business advisory unit that we formed to help startup and scale ups get access to capital. So right as you mentioned, investment, capital raising is our bread and butter. I've been doing this for quite some time. Started off in investment banking between Morocco and Paris. I sit in Sao Paulo today, helping one of the large technology businesses, which is Quintes, through their capital raising and then M&A. So it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to share what we've all acquired over the years.
Happy to have you. Now we have a last guest who is Andrew. I will be typed about him for now, but he will join us in the next 10 minutes. But ahead of Andrew coming, I think we should go ahead and start anyways, just to honor those of you who have made it here in time. So our first question, I think I'll ask Ifeoma the first few questions. And if you have a question for Ifeoma specifically, feel free to drop it in the chat because she might have to leave earlier than this call will end. So I'll just jump right in. Ifeoma, I have seen you pitch amazingly, and it's almost entertaining watching you speak about your business. But I'll just ask, especially highlighting your experience at Knockin last year, how do you think was ways that you were able to effectively share the vision and mission of Sendstack with investors? And previously, I know you did something similar with Frugals. Again, how are you able to share like what is at the heart of your business and how you're doing it with investors to get them to buy in?
Well, the first thing I would say is when or like whenever there's a need to pitch, don't think of it as pitching like a formal thing that you have to do. Even though there will be like a lot of planning and like rehearsing to it, right? So at the core of it, have it at the back of your mind that you're trying to get people, real human beings, to care
Yeah.
about the same things that you care about. And it's as with every other like psychological principle, like when we're speaking to people that we're close to, our friends, our family, ask yourself, how do I get these people that I'm talking to care about this same problem that I have, like decided to care about, to the point of investing time and resources building solutions for. So always come from that perspective, right? Like don't be too robotic. And then to answer that, I would say that you don't just want to pitch per se. You're taking action and you want a response to that action. And there are a few ways to like think of getting that reaction or like that response that you want, whether you're pitching to investors or you're even pitching your solution to like potential customers. I would also always say, like, ask yourself, do I just want to have a good pitch, or do I want to have a pitch that is impactful and gets people to actually take action? And this would, eventually craft, or like it would form how you shape and structure your story, um and even down to like your delivery. So the simple answer to these questions is a principle that I came up with last year, and it is to fall in love. Like everybody likes the topic of love, and I know like we're probably all wondering like, what does love have to do with pitching? But it's simple. You have to
Yes.
fall in love with your, first of all, what you're talking about, like your problem, the problem that you've discovered, and your solution. You have to fall so in love with it, because that's the only way like passion would be able to reflect on like the ears that are listening to you. You also have to fall in love with the people that you're creating the solution for. You cannot be performative about trying to raise money or like raise funds to solve a problem. So you have to care so deeply about your customers and your users. Um, and this, or the potential customers and users, because you might be pitching at different stages of the business. And then you also have to fall in love with the listeners, and by fall in love I mean that very like loose, I'm using that very loosely, but you have to care enough about the person that you're talking to, the people that you're talking to. You have to get to know a bit more about them. You have to do like, your findings, know who they are, what do they care about, what angle of the business do they really care about. Are they an impact driven investor? Are they very like profits, like returns driven investor? What kind of companies have they invested in? You have to care so much to do those findings. Because I see that sometimes the power dynamics between when founders are pitching to investors, like you don't want to make it sound like you're begging. You are actually bringing a solution and selling it to people whose job it is to invest, right? So my simple principle is to fall in love. I have like different like um what's it called, different, will I say, themes under that simple principle. But before I like go into it, I would obviously like let some other people speak, um if there are no follow-on questions from that.
Okay. Thank you so much. Do we have any thoughts on that? Because I was going to ask her another question just so she can exit the room in time. But if we have any thoughts, be happy to hear them before she goes ahead.
I mean, I love the concept of falling in love. I've never thought about it before like that, but yeah, I mean, if you're in love, love is something that projects, so it will come through if you understand the investors that you're talking to, if you understand the customers that you're talking to, and if you really believe in the solution that you're selling, it comes through when you're pitching. Yeah, so
It
I love
does.
that idea of thinking of it as in love. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks, Ifeoma. I think what I caught on what she said was you actually fall in love with your product and then selling it, not in a way as if you are begging the investors. Because we always seem to forget this, right? It's very difficult to raise capital, but it's also very difficult to deploy capital. So on the VCs end, they are actually struggling to get good deals to invest in. So going to them with an approach of selling what you have, but remaining at the bar of not actually looking as if you are begging them to invest, is something that I think founders should also have in mind, because they as much as want to invest, in as much as you also need capital too. So there's a balance there. So I think that if you're marketed, right, and that's the approach basically we use when we're helping with capital raise as well.
That's such a rich perspective because I've never heard it from the perspective of, as people who hold the funds, it's also a bit difficult to find good deals to invest in. So I think that's definitely like, for me, that's my personal takeaway, that both sides of the power dynamic hold some value. And so entrepreneurs should do well to remember that and keep it top of mind. Ifeoma, if you have extra plus, if you want to take us deeper into your pitching philosophy, would be glad. If you're ready for my next question too, that is a great option for me as well.
To help,
That's
just to
okay.
help like that principle stick a bit more. So there's an acronym I've come up with, and it's called lovers. So when you're pitching, remember your lovers, your LOVERS. And L stands for listening. So you have to, before you speak, before you're pitching, you have to have listened. And this is likened back to the principle of like how we communicate in our personal relationships, right? So you've listened to your customers, you've listened to the people that you're building for, you've done enough listening, and you've taken time to listen, and whatever you're pitching is then a response to like all the information that you've taken in. So always remember to listen first, listen to people, listen to the people that you're creating for, because they can even shape your story or like your fundraising story more than the idea that you may have had like prior to talking to them. So listen. Also, when you get into the room or the pitch crowd or whatever, try to get a feel of the audience. Don't just jump in and like start pitching. And then the second letter is O, stands for originality. And I know that this sounds like a very cliche thing to say, but like people can sense it when you're trying to be like someone else, and they actually hate it more than we know. Like people can tell when people have watched like different videos of different people doing their thing, and they can sense when there is like a very um basically when you're not being yourself, it's more palpable than you understand. So originality, whatever your style is, if you're the calm speaker, or you're the power speaker, or you're the in between, just remember like to be original, and obviously knowing where to tweak your originality to suit different audience. So being calm would reflect in different ways if you were speaking to a large like audience, or it would reflect in a different way if you were having a one-on-one conversation. So just knowing what your style is and showing up in the most original way will go a long way for your pitch. And then the V stands for voice. The voice is a much more like powerful tool than we give it credit for. Your voice is literally able to project as many emotions that exist like globally. With one voice, you can project anger, you can project passion, you can project care, you can project like different, you can go up and down. So remember to use your voice and use it very well. So know when to emphasize on certain words, know when to stop, know when to take your pitch, like the tone of your voice up higher for emphasis, know when to slow it down so that you get people's attention. So just creating that rhythm with your voice, instead of having like maybe like a flat tone, would really go a long way with even getting people, whoever you're talking to get a sense of how deeply you feel the passion for what you're speaking about. And then the E stands for exhale, like breathe in, breathe out. Don't be too don't be too focused on trying to fill in silent gaps, right? So if there are moments where you need to pause for a few seconds, do away with the oohs and the ums and the ahs. Just embrace that silence, or those silent moments in between your pitch. And then the R stands for rehearsals. And I know that it's very easy to come up with a pitch and look like you were not rehearsed. Sorry, it's very difficult rather, but it takes a lot of practice. Like the more you practice and practice and practice, the more it becomes more natural to you, the more your brain assimilates information. So if you have a pitch in 2 weeks' time, I don't expect that you just start preparing the night before. Like the moment you know that you have a pitch, that's the moment you start rehearsing, you start practicing with people, getting as much feedback. Look at yourself in the mirror, talk to yourself, act like you're the crowd, you're the audience, and just rehearse a lot. Don't wing it. Like, don't wing it. Anybody who looks like they are winging it is probably already just an expert or like a pro in speaking publicly. And then the last one is S, and it stands for stories. So remember to tell a story. It's always better to tell a story, because what this does is that it helps you build a deeper connection with who you're talking to. I know that there is that excitement to want to talk about your product or want to talk about how much you're already making or financial projections, but remember that we're speaking to human beings at the core of everything. I personally would always put people before anything. So you're talking to people. What is your story? What is the story? It may not be your story, but it may be a story. So always pitch from the angle of telling a story. Um, no matter what that story is. So, for example, when I pitched at Norkin, I told the story of how where I am with Sendstack was as a result of like failing from a previous venture because of the problem of logistics. That's my story. We had other founders talk about, you know, coming up with fintech ideas because they couldn't send money to their grandma or like their grandpa, or like healthcare ideas. So you always want to tell a story, because more than anything else, it helps you remember what exactly and why exactly you started out. And it just makes like, ultimately, when you know your story, nobody can take that away from you. So even when you've forgotten the rehearsed part of the pitch, your story serves as a guide and brings you back on track, and you find that you're able to just take it from there, um regardless of like how it goes. So yeah.
Okay. You seem you seem to have this down to a science. But one thing I know for sure is that anybody who looks like they're doing something really well, even they have the days where it doesn't go so well. So my next question is, on the days where you get a no, where it's a rejection, or you're waiting for an email back and the email never comes, how do you deal with that?
So to even follow up from what I just said about stories, again, your story is your power, right? So even when you get a no, you have to find a way to take that no back and put it, or find a position for it in your story, right? So think of your story as like something that is not ending, and there are different plays and um what do you call these things, plot twists that could happen. So I think from the very get-go, expect a no. To be quite frank with you, there are some pitches or like investor calls we have, and we, like my co-founder and I, know we're literally just using it for practice, and that will most likely get a no. So I think that finding that balance between like being optimistic because you're solving a valid problem, but also, I don't want to say being pessimistic so that nobody gets me wrong, but also just balancing your optimism with reality, right? So I think on times when I get a no, I have most likely already expected it to happen, because I like, as a founder, one thing that is heightened is my intuition, or like even understanding what it feels like to make hard decisions. So I'm also imagining, okay, it must have been hard for these people to say no to. Maybe I tell myself a lie so that I don't feel bad. And then on times where maybe where I really did expect a yes and I got a no, then I just find a way to take that no and turn it back into like a piece of the story and keep going. And keep going doesn't mean there's an automatic switch back, but it's like, okay, maybe I need the rest of the day off. That's fine. But I think um the general principle is that you probably get more no's than yeses, to be quite frank. Because imagine everybody told you yes for everything. That would just be very chaotic. Because then the burden of making those decisions would be on me. And I don't think human beings have like a track record of making the best decisions. So I'm always happy whenever like there's someone else that can lift up that burden of making a decision. And I see no's that come in sometimes as someone else helping me make a decision because they're in the better position to do it at the time.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, Ifeoma. Now, while you were talking, I saw Leah nodding a lot. So I imagine she has a lot to share. I imagine she has many thoughts on what you were sharing. So I'll give her the floor now.
I was agreeing to a lot of what Ifeoma said, and it's really awesome to hear like from a founder who's doing it. Coming from a point of running an accelerator, we're actually currently running one cohort where we've made it a mandatory thing that we do rehearsals every week. So they are going to rehearse every like rehearsals are important. And before we get to demo day, they'll have done 12 practice speeches with us, and hopefully they also do at home their practice speech before they come to even our own practice speech. And part of the thing what we tell them is you have to create like a script. And I love how Ifeoma is talking about it. Sounds like a movie, plot twists, everything. All these things exist in real life, so you need your script. So for every slide that you're presenting, know your script, practice your script, rehearse your script. Where are you going to put emphasis, put a bigger bit to it, where you're going to slow down, if it's part of your story where something sad happened, how do you make it come out alive. You don't have to force tears, but how do you bring that emotion, so that the investor connects with you, that this is something that happened to you, and out of this event, then it has propelled you forward. So I'm just agreeing that I really love that lovers concept. I'm actually going to write it down, and we're going to work with it as well. The rehearsal element is really key, for the founder, and it really gives you that confidence to where even if something comes up, ad hoc, it's just an opportunity that came up, because you've been doing a lot of rehearsals. It's part of you, your story is part of you, your script is part of you. It's easy to take advantage of even opportunities that you hadn't planned for. Yeah.
Okay, so you said something about letting the plot twist come through in your rehearsal or in your script. My question to you is, how do you let your impact also come through? Because I think where we're at in investing currently, there's a lot of impact investing, and even when it's not impact investing, investors are looking to understand what's the impact that you've made. So how do you think that founders can showcase their impact so that it appeals to investors like this?
You're right. The impact is important. And so, for example, everyone wants to hear the numbers. As much as we want to have the story, you also need to have your data. So one way you can bring out the impact is when you're doing your slides, you're able to say, for example, when you're talking about customers, remember Ifeoma mentioned about knowing your customers. If you've done some research, with your customers, if you've done some focus groups, you have reports and you have some data to say, we did a focus group and 80% of the respondents said this, or 80% of our customers lean towards this feature. So you need to have that data to go along. And for example, let's say you're a microfinance or you're a fintech and you've been able to support some businesses. So you can say, we've been able to support X number of businesses increase their income by X. So this data can come through. You don't want to maybe put it too much as writing in the slides, but when you're doing your scripting, you have your notes where you have to bring in this data, you have to mention this data. And then also it comes back again on your traction slide. When you're talking about your traction, you should be able to have the numbers that show the impact. So some founders will talk about, oh, we've been able to help so many women do this, but it doesn't help, for example, if it's Ernest going to look for funding, uh, to make his case if there's no real numbers behind what you're saying. And this also requires you to do the work. So as much as you have a beautiful pitch deck, you also need to have done the work. And as part of pitching is answering questions to your investors. So this data that you're putting together based on your research, based on your focus groups, based on all the readings you're doing, will also still feature, even if you don't mention it during the main pitch. It will still feature when you're doing your question and answer session. So you really have to have your data correct, and then you need to also understand your impact in terms of numbers. That's what I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. And I
Thank you,
also
Leah.
just
Now, okay,
I also
Ifeoma,
want
please go ahead.
yeah, I also wanted to add something about impact, right? So I think impact is also very dependent on like the stage you're in. So and impact is a long term thing. Just generally, when we think of people who are impactful, they are people who have done things over time. So also knowing that, for example, as a 1 year old or 6 month old startup, you possibly like, how do you define impact, if we're being very honest? So thinking of impact as one, data, like Leah has said. So I assume that for companies who have been around for some time, you should definitely be able to have the numbers, but also think of it as something that is ingrained in your basic principles as a company, that even if you haven't done anything yet, this is your 5 year plan. This is what you will do in 10 years. And what you're asking for at the time is what will get you there. It's very important because even geographically, for example, businesses in Nigeria, when we talk about impact in places like Europe, you're already hearing things about sustainability, reducing like carbon, all those things. But we can't really, like, at this stage where we are in Nigeria, um, a business in Europe can't define impact in the same way that a business in Nigeria would. So, for example, in Nigeria, you're looking at more financial impact because people are still like people still have very low spending power. If we decided to bring like EVs and make everything like complete electric vehicles, it would still not be possible. So you want to think of impact as creatively as you can, but in a way that is not performative. Because to be honest, as even if you have impact on one side, like, so there's this ripple effect, right, that your business might be impactful in a certain way, but it's creating problems for another business to now come and solve. So take for example logistics. If how we define impact is the number of operators, and the gig workers that we basically give opportunities and like access to, these markets too. But we are not yet measuring things like how much carbon emissions and all these things. So you are basically like, as the more operators we are helping, the more carbon like emissions are happening, right? But once we get to a point of stability, then we're now able to introduce new initiatives and say, okay, we've figured out this part of the business. Now we want to introduce a greener part of, like, a green, maybe Sendstack green, where it's more like sustainability driven, and we now have enough like revenue or like profits to be able to maybe import like vehicles from other parts of the world. So just like that's just like a rough example. That would look like different things for different businesses and business models, but also thinking of impact as a long-term thing. And I think like it's definitely up to the founders or like people telling the story to be able to know what exactly they want to do in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, even if it changes, and sell that to whoever you're pitching to. And it's also up to like the investors or like people listening to be able to give feedback and really like hear maybe those unsaid words, because quite frankly, if you're pitching and you have 1 minute or 3 minutes, there's only so much you can say. but I do believe that like when people listen more, you probably hear things that are not said. So I'm just saying because like in terms of impact in Africa, like it's still, and like having data, like first of all, it's so hard to even get like data points. Like there's just so many things that are not like as centralized as like other locations or like other places. But seeing it as the more we help businesses get to that stage, the more we help founders get to that state, the more like long-term impact like businesses would be able to have, both economically or like environmentally, socially, and like in many different ways.
Okay, thank you so much, Ifeoma. Now Andrew just entered the room, but I'll direct my next question towards Ernest while Andrew settles in. Ernest, I want to ask you, what are specific considerations or challenges that you think African founders have pitching to international investors? I mean, you're uniquely positioned to answer this question, so I'm curious. Please share with the room.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I think that I would just pick up from the impact part and then I'll focus on my other points, right? So I
Okay.
think that the first thing you'd want to consider as a founder is also impact, right? So picking up from Ifeoma's point, so these international investors, most of them that are focused on Africa, are more impact and diversity focused, right? As opposed to profitability, etc. So how do you as a founder blend that impact? So for example, Ifeoma was mentioning that the fact that you're in Africa, you have to focus on what you can realistically achieve from an impact basis, right? So if you're running a logistics business in Africa, it's the first thing is probably not to go green. It's the impact in creating jobs to gig workers, etc., increasing their purchasing power, increasing their household spending, right? So impact is a big piece. And secondly, founders need to be open from a structure perspective, right? So what do I mean by that is some of these foreign investors might not want to invest in Africa. So how are you flexible enough, or what kind of knowledge or background do you have in terms of setting up a structure, maybe an LLC or maybe a company in Europe that can connect with what you have in Africa, right? And at the same time, what is part of what you are doing impacting the allocation. So one, obviously, is impact. Two is being open in terms of structure. And then my third one would be probably just um, just understanding their geography focus, right? So you need to do a lot of diligence, and I think this goes back to Ifeoma and Leah's point is that you need to do a lot of diligence. I'm a big fan of quality investor roadmap as opposed to quantity, right? So you have a lot of investors, a lot of founders that are spraying around their pitches around and talking to maybe 100 investors a day. For me, I think that it's much better if it's more quality focused. So, what is the diligence that you've done on an investor? How sure are you that this international investor is specifically focused in your region, right? So, we have international investors that are focused on the Francophone Africa, you have investors that are focused on Anglophone Africa. So, these three pieces, I think, is what founders should focus on interacting with international investors.
Okay, thank you so much, Ernest. Any thoughts from anyone in the room? After which Andrew will go ahead and introduce himself. Leah, I know that your company, Sandtech, has some presence off the continent as well. So would you say that your accelerator is at the point where you're having these cross-continental discussions, or is this your first cohort? How is that going?
So we have two parts when it comes to our entrepreneurship arm. We have LX Ventures, where we support tech startups in Africa. We connect them, we help them to develop and then access funding. Then we have a platform called FutureList, which is a global innovation platform. So on the FutureList, you can see what's happening in entrepreneurship ecosystems across the globe. And what we are doing is that we are curating these ecosystems. We're curating connections, helping investors globally understand what's available in the local markets. And then also we are creating those connections between local founders and international or global players when it comes to entrepreneurship. So it's two arms of the business, you could say, like sister sister arms that support each other. So on one side, we are understanding the ecosystem pulses in different markets, as like London, the UK, London, the States, and then Africa, and we're creating those connections and networks. And then on the other side, we're curating this amazing pipeline of tech startups that are investor ready and can access these connections.
Amazing. Thank you. Andrew, over to you.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to actually be here. Thanks again to Boxplay for inviting me. Also, again, yes, I'm actually very sorry for joining late. I had a meeting that took longer than I expected. But just a quick intro. My name is Andrew. Andrew Aryee. I am the head of Ventures Program at Innovate Hub. And an Innovate Hub, what we do basically is supporting early stage startups or Series A or B startups to actually get the actual support they need from the early stage of translating the ideas into a tangible prototype, and then also closing the loop directly by helping them get in touch with investors. So we help directly with both technical and sustainable venture support system. So basically, that's it.
Okay, thank you so much, Andrew. Now I have a question for you. I'd like to know, I realized that you see a lot of pitch decks, so I'm curious as to what you think are ways that we could use visual presentation techniques to create better pitches generally that would appeal to investors, because there's a lot to talk about. Oh, it's not about the design, it's not about the design, but I realized that it does matter. So what's your take on that?
So, I mean, it's before I actually answer this, I want people to actually understand, the audience to actually understand that having a pitch deck as a startup is basically a direct representative of a CV for someone applying for a job, which looks like it for a founder. So, a founder would like to see your pitch deck and then understand that you would actually be capable to be able to deliver the services that you are promising to deliver, or you will be able to solve the problem that you are willing to solve. But then again, you need the buy-in of the founders. Now, most of the startups actually are able to create like very beautiful pitch decks and all that, but then again, they lose the content on the way of trying to beautify how the pitch deck is supposed to look like, and that's a big problem. The other thing again is that many people actually focus too much on trying to make the pitch deck look so good that they come in so unprepared in delivering the actual message that they need to deliver. So I'm going back to the perspective where people are looking at being able to turn these random ideas that they have in their sleep and then trying to turn them into a sustainable ventures by trying to translate the problem and linking it directly to the solution, and then also breaking it down to the business model for people to actually understand the FOMO that ties to it. Now, from this angle, you realize that most of them are struggling to even answer the questions that the investors are asking. So I'm talking about questions like legal questions. No one comes in prepared for that, right? People also struggle to come up with questions that are like financial modeling. No one is really ready to answer that. They go about and say, okay, I'm doing B2B modeling. Now, doing bidding, you are going on a B2B or B2C scale. It's not the answer about how you intend to enter the market. These are the nitty gritties that people tend to ignore and then always just go ahead and say, okay, this is my problem, this is my solution, this is my value proposition, and then I'm intending to enter the market with a B2B approach. But then breaking it down for them to understand how you really need to enter the market, it's a problem. Now and again, the other thing again is market entry is just one step, right? And then once you enter the market, how do you intend to sustain the market? How do you intend to grow and expand within the market? These are things that people tend to ignore because, again, it's capital raising. The moment you get the money, you're expecting to turn it out into millions of gold, right? It's literally a gold mine. But then again, people actually forget to actually pitch how you intend to actually get exponential growth in your financials to be able to convince the investors. So most of the things, I think most of us, we have a very good graphical approach to making pitch decks and all that, very beautiful. But then again, we lack a lot more in the content and go a lot more unprepared from that angle. Thank you.
Okay, so I would say I understand you perfectly because that's exactly how I was going to summarize what you shared. That's rather surprising and a bit disappointing. I think it connects back to what Ifeoma said about it means you haven't listened enough to understand what's in it for the investor. Because if you understood what was in it for the investor, then you would like speak to the legal constraints that you have, the financial modeling and all of that. So thank you for sharing that. That's super interesting. Leah and Ernest, do you have any experience of similar situations from your side as well?
Um,
Yeah, it's a very
yeah,
common
maybe
problem.
Leah should start and then I'll wrap up.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, so I was saying that it's a very common problem. So you have this beautiful pitch deck, but you're not able to articulate it, and which brings you back to the scripting. So understand exactly what message or what point you want to put across for each slide. And just as Andrew said, there will be questions. So maybe another strategy would be for each slide, you think about what questions will be asked on this slide, and you could easily go to ChatGPT and let it ask you questions as an investor, and then you prepare for each and every question. Some questions might not be asked, some questions might be asked, but at least you are ready. It's the same thing as if you're going to do a sale. You're essentially selling your business. So when you go for a sale, you have to think about what will be the customer objections. And these are like, what are the questions that will make the investor not buy, or the whoever you're selling to not buy. So you have to think about that. So alongside your script, where you want to bring the punchy message, you also should have your other list of questions which you've prepared to answer. So then you don't get caught off guard and then you look unprepared, and then investors just get turned off. I'll pass it on to Ernest.
Sure. So I think my point of view is, although we're talking about the content, we also need to bear in mind that the graphical presentation is also important, right? So um, because at the end of the day, if it's not put together graphically, nobody's going to pay attention to it, right? So I've dealt with multiple businesses, same businesses, different pitches, different responses, right? So I always give that this analogy to my clients that people talk about, and this is dating, right? So people talk about beauty. There's beauty within. Beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder,
Inner beauty.
right? And people talk about, you need to get to know the woman to understand her behavior. But in actual sense, what guys will tell you that if it's not attractive to the eye, I don't even get close to understand the behavior, right? So this is the same analogy that I put in, and it's like a lady with makeup or without makeup. So if it's not graphically done, nobody's going to get in to understand the cracks of it, right? So
Mm.
obviously you don't want to overshadow the graphics. You want to have some content in, because the graphics might get the attention, but then if the content is not good, it doesn't get you the sustained focus of the investor, right? And then also tailor-made and custom-made pitches, right? So you have
Yeah.
founders that have one pitch and they are selling it to 100 investors, right? So um, every investor has a different niche. Every investor has a different focus. You can have an investor that is interested in maybe cooking or interested in sports, right? So how do you find that middle ground with the investor, right? How do you find that pitch that is tailored exactly for that investor? It doesn't mean you need to overdo it or redo it, but it probably maybe you have to add one slide, or you probably have to turn it the other way around. So I would say content is one. Also,
Mm-hmm.
don't underestimate graphics, because it gets the attention. And then thirdly, just having a tailor-made pitch for that specific investor.
Okay. Now, speaking of tailor-made, there's this other thought I was having that, and now I'm sure Leah sees this a lot, or well, all three of you at this point, that there are many businesses out of Africa, but it seems like they might look the same. Like maybe there are probably 10,000 fintech startups that are banking the unbanked in out of maybe Lagos, Nigeria. So my question is, how can startups differentiate themselves or to showcase their competitive advantage when they are talking about their business or pitching their business? Feel free to answer, anyone in the room.
Uh,
Um,
okay. Okay,
okay,
Ernest, you can go.
okay. Let me. So, probably this is not to answer your question, but I've had this funny analogy with founders, right? So there's this competitor slide that they put in a bunch of companies that seem like doing what they do, and then they take everything for them, and then the other companies they just put one tick or two. So um, my posture is that you don't really need to be unique because there's only so many unique ideas that you can have, right? But how are you original to your story? So, for example, um, solving, going back to your point of fintech, right? So, probably increasing the bankable population of it, right? You have a lot of fintechs that are doing that, but probably what can differentiate you from them is that what is the specific area that you are targeting, right? So, what specific area in Lagos in Nigeria are you targeting to make bankable? What are the number of people that you have done to achieve that, or what's your goal? So there is so much, the market is so large that you don't need to be unique, but you can be also focused on a particular niche that you are targeting, right? So for example, I'm a fintech, I'm helping to increase the bankable population in this region in Lagos. These are the number of people that I'm focusing on. These are my targets. This is my percentage of people that I want to convert to be bankable. That for me, it's unique on its own, right? So
Mm,
that is where I wanted to touch on, and probably Andrew might add some more on that.
okay.
I mean, I agree with Ernest. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. But there's another angle that I also want to come out with, but at this point. So let me. I always like to give it as an example when I'm talking to people that every investor is scared of FOMO. Now, the FOMO is a slang that we usually use, and it's actually called fear of missing out, right? Now, every investor is literally scared of missing out on opportunities, and these opportunities are how you could particularly tailor out your pitch deck. Another angle could be that you are actually looking at let's say you have a pitch deck that is work around, let's say, medical device, right, health tech, and then you are talking about to a group of people that are not in the health sector. Now, talking to these people and you using medical terminologies, you're literally losing the crowd, right? So you would have to tailor knowing your audience, knowing who they are, who sits in the room, who is listening to your pitch deck, or who would read your pitch deck, and then tailor the language of your pitch deck to their understanding for them to be able to literally comprehend everything from beginning to the end and then ask you the questions appropriately. Which means that, I mean, I always tell people that after making a 5 minute pitch deck and no one asks you a question, you've literally failed because no one understood what you wanted to say. That's what I tell most of my people that come to our hub. Because if you pitch and no one is interested, I mean, literally, if you listen to someone speak for 2 minutes and you don't ask a question, you yourself know that you literally want the person to just finish what he's saying and get out of the room. But then again, if after 2 minutes you are able to get some one or two questions where you feel that part was not well explained, then that means that at least you've piqued the interest of the person that you're speaking to. So these are some of the things that you need to look at: understanding your audience, tailoring your pitch deck to their understanding, and then also making sure that you hit on the value proposition of your business, and then also make sure that you stress on the opportunities that the person would miss out if he or she does not invest or partner with you. So these are some of the things that I would also want to stress on. Leah, do you have anything to say?
No, I agree with you, Andrew. Yeah, it's a failure if you do your pitch and then nobody asks any questions. So you need to know your audience, and this goes back to what Ifeoma had told us. And if you follow that acronym or whatever she shared that about, you need to listen, you need to observe your audience. You need to also make sure that you've rehearsed ahead of time as much as possible as well. Yeah.
Okay. Now, in raising capital for a business, pitching is just one of the different parts. So, what do you think are other things that entrepreneurs could do to increase their chances of actually being successful with capital raising?
Okay, can I start? Probably.
Yeah, you
So
can go ahead.
when I started my career, working as an analyst, I always thought that preparing the unboxing, the teaser was like everything, right? But then you realize that the preparation of the material is probably 10 to 20% of the whole capital raising journey, right? So what are the things that I think founders should, brace themselves up for the whole process is one is diligence, right? So um, remember, there's going to be a ton of questions coming at you, right? So you want someone to give you 100,000, 500,000, 1 million. It's incredibly difficult, right? So think of it even asking for a loan from your friend and how many questions you're going to respond to that. So uh, founders come out of accelerators and they think that they can just raise, $1 million. No, it's not. It's very difficult, right? So prepare yourself for questions. A lot of questions are going to be thrown your way. Financial diligence. You might be an early stage startup. You might not have a lot of numbers, but what have you done operationally? What is the data? Going back to Leah's point, what is the data that you amassed, right? So prepare yourself for that. Financial, legal. People have ideas on their pitch decks, but you ask them if they've even formed the structure. They haven't formed the structure of a company. So being adept also on the legal piece of it, right? And all boils down to also don't shy away of having an investor, right? So I always tell my clients that people think of having advisors as something that is, way late in the game, but you 5 times to 10 times much better having an advisor, because what founders forget is that the goal is not to raise capital. The goal is to grow your business to achieve the ambitions and the goal of your business, right? Raising capital is not the goal. So the question is, how do you grow your business, right? And if capital raising is part of the journey, you probably need to have a dedicated team that is focused on it. Because what founders seem to forget is that at the end of the whole capital raising process, the grueling, the questions, and etc., before the final term sheet is delivered, the investor is going to ask you one question: what is the business as of today? And you're going to tell the investor that, well, I spent the last few months answering your questions. He's going to tell you, well, you are not able to deliver, right? So
Yeah.
there's a whole thing. So 10% of it is just preparing the pitch, delivering it, but there's a whole path that I think that the founders need to prepare is the questions, the diligence, and also having the ability to focus on the business. And if you cannot multitask, get an advisor that obviously you're working on an aligned basis that will help you with the capital raising, because it's very hard to approach investors, to talk to investors. You don't want to waste your time talking to 20 investors in a week, right? You want someone to filter that out to bring you the best 10 that are likely to invest in your business, right? Because at the end of the day, as
Okay.
well, like I said, the goal is to grow the business, not to raise the capital. So that's a little bit of what I have on the additional things that you need to do in addition to setting up your pitch and materials.
Okay. So more beyond now, this question is specific to Leah, and it's essentially the same question. So beyond preparing your people, having them rehearse their pitch decks, what do you say the journey to making them investor ready looks like? Because I think a lot of people might be bootstrapping their startups, using it as a side hustle, and they think, oh, I'm ready to go to investors. If in your assessment, what would you say makes someone investor ready or not? And if you could give like a specific list of things that they would actually have to check to really be investor ready, what would you say your list looks like?
Okay. And because I'm not looking anywhere, I'll just talk off the top of my head, and maybe Andrew and Ernest can add to that. So this is like not something you can write, but the founder has to be very clear. So you have to be very clear as a founder what solution you're providing, what problem you're solving. How do you want your business to look like in the next year, in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? Founders who have that clarity and have that passion are easier to help or to support. That's number one. Number two, also they are coachable. So they are open to getting help. So for example, as we're doing this accelerator, Ernest has kept mentioning the advisor. One of the things that they must finish the accelerator with is a board of advisors, formal board of advisors. So usually founders will wait until, wait to see if the business is doing well or to be perfect before you bring in advisors. Part of it is feeling embarrassed to put yourself out there. So the other thing I would say is that they have to be coachable and open to advisory from the beginning, because that's the only way that you learn. So once you have that clarity, then you have your pitch deck. That pitch deck that enables you to really articulate what your business is about. And we are assuming that by the time you've gotten to your pitch deck, you've done some basics like understanding your business model. So whether it means you have your business model canvas and you have some financials in terms of projections, even if you've not started maybe making revenue, you have some an Excel sheet that shows us at least a snapshot of how those numbers could look like. That's really important. So once you have your pitch deck, you also have to put in place some things like the incorporation. You have to, because most investors who are coming to Africa at least want to see some traction, and you can't start saying you have traction if you've not even registered legally the company, you don't have some legal documents in place. And then also, if you, because you will have what we call a data room, if you have a marketing plan or a go-to-market strategy, that's really important as well. You have it there in your data room so that you understand. If you have a team, you need to have the profiles of your team members or your co-founders. If you have a co-founder, it's also important that you have a shareholders agreement. So these are things, for example, when you finish the pitch and the investor is really excited, the next step is the due diligence. So if you have all these things in your data room already, it's easy to share so that that process doesn't take that long, okay? So you have your go-to-market strategy, which means if you give me this money right now, I'm going to market, I already have the plan. And by tomorrow or by next week, we just roll out. All we need to do is roll out. So that also needs to be in place. Legal structures, like Andrew said, there are a lot of legal questions that will come. Whatever you need to have put in place, you can put in place. And usually it's good to take this downtime to put those things in place, whether it's things like your financial policy, your procurement policy, put those things down, because it's easy to do it now. Your team, your people development manual or your HR policy, put those things down, let them be ready. They can always be tweaked, but have them down. Every document that you need, every policy document that you need for your business, put it down now when you don't have money or when you're still talking to customers. And I would also say, even though we don't have a lot of data, there's something that you must have done to understand your market. So do that research if it means going to the ground. And sometimes you'll say that I talked to 10 people, but what will really help is that if you talk to those 10 people on Zoom and recorded that call and recorded their feedback and then analyze and have like a report, a very simple report. If you had 20 people that are willing to give you feedback, invite them to a focus group, record that, have that report, add it as part of your data room to validate that this is what my potential customers are saying. So, I mean, this is, there could be more, but this is what I could say at the top of my mind, and I'll let Andrew and Ernest add to that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Any
probably
other
have
thoughts as we round up?
one more thing to add.
Let's hear it.
And most founders forget that investors are not, as you say, Father Christmas, right? People give you money, they want to get their money back, right? So a lot of people forget that. They run through the whole problem, solution, business model, market plan. What's the exit? I give you my money, I want to know how I can get out, right? So
Yeah, I'm
we
not
need
funding your
to,
dreams.
yes, so people help you get to a point, but nobody's going to give you the money forever. So what's your 5-year plan, right? So tying it to your growth plan, how is the investor going to get out, right? So is it an investor coming in to take them out? Is it an acquisition going to come? You need to have that in place. And what are the expected returns? Going back to the point, having your Excel sheet showing your growth, etc. What are the use of proteins clearly done to show that, and we do this for founders all the time. You need to probably have like a three statement model, right? Not just a spreadsheet that says, this is my income statement, this is my revenues, right? So you need to have a three statement model that models in the income statement and then the cash flow to exactly show the use of proceeds for your business. And at the end of the day,
Mhm.
you need to show the returns that the investor would probably get, because at the end of the day, they want to know how to get their money back, right? So that's one point that I think that we should hammer in,
Mm,
for farmers.
mm. Andrew, I will allow you to have the last thought since we barely got to hear from you today.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I actually have a lot to say, but most
Please go ahead.
piggybacking what Leah and Ernest said. Um, but I would want to start with what the point that Ernest ended with. Look, investors are not for the Christmas, just like Ernest said. Regardless of how passionate you are with the solution you have, you need to be pragmatic about how viable your solution is in the market, right? So one of the best things we usually say in our initial venture creation journey is, look, you better fall in love with the problem and then hate your solution. Because once you fall in love with your solution as opposed to your problem, then you focus on making adjustments to make your solution work. But that doesn't fit in the market. But then if you fall in love with the problem, then and the initial solution you came up with doesn't work, during your market validation process, you would understand that what you initially wanted to solve was not the best solution. Not being it being not the best solution has many angles coming at it, right? It could be from the monetary point of affordability. It could be the look and feel of it. It could be the size and weight of it. It could be the target audience or the reach of the market. All these things could literally affect the solution. So from that angle, you have to go back to the drawing board and start again from scratch, right? And that is why I appreciate what Ernest also said, that you need to have a validation journey. The journey that you have would literally make the investors understand that you've done a lot of groundwork. You've had a skin in the game. Now, I would not invest 10,000. I'm starting with 10,000 because I'm thinking these are early stage startups or people that would want to start with some business. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to get $1 million from the beginning. But so let's start with the let's say a quote $25,000 grant. With such investment, I would want to know that you have already sacrificed something. You have something to lose, right? And I would also want to make sure that you have the best of the best team or team people in your team, sorry, of members in your team. You cannot solve a medical problem and then have farmers in your team. You cannot say that you are solving fintech issues and then all you have are medical officers. It doesn't make sense to me, right? So you need to have a balance in your teamwork. Have market experts, have business development experts, have if a tech expert, and then have like someone who drives the entire vision from beginning to the end. Now, I'm quite sure that you've spoken a lot more about all of these things, but one of the best things I want to also end with is you cannot sell your pitch deck to me when you are shy. You need to be confident. I need to have the confidence in you that once I invest in you, you would be able to stand in the market even without any product and still sell things and invest and get people's buy-in, right? This is what drives the African market. So most of these things are it varies on case to case basis, but I would actually think that most of the points have actually already been guarded and have been mentioned by any of us. And then if further questions, I'm quite sure they'll run to you and then we will be able to provide more answers eventually. Thanks for the
Sure
opportunity.
thing. Sure thing. Thank you so much, Leah, for coming from the accelerator side from Sandtech, Ernest from Incluziv Studios on the investor side, and Andrew, what specifically does your company do if you want to share briefly? Because I think everyone got to say a little bit about what they do, but you didn't.
Oh, okay. So Innovate Hub is basically an innovation center. So all we do is try to grow startups from the early stage to the Series B or investor readiness stage. So we are basically an NGO, not-for-profit organization, just basically supporting people with technology development and then also venture creation support. We are based in
So is it
Abuja,
like an
Nigeria.
incubator then?
Yes, it's before incubation, actually.
Before incubation stage.
Before
Amazing.
incubation.
So I'm really glad that we've got perspectives from all of these different angles of the ecosystem. Thank you so much. This has been a very exciting conversation. I'm sure it's super valuable for everyone who joined and everyone who will see this after. But thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing so generously. Feel free to search them up on LinkedIn and ping them if you need their support or their organization's support. I'm sure they'll be happy to help in their professional capacities. Have an amazing day and thank you so much for being here. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.